very special guest with us, Dr. Alex Balekian, who is running for Congress in the 30th District here in California. I hate to use the Bugs Bunny line, but what's up, Doc? Thank you for being on the program. It was too tempting not to use it. You're our first doctor, I think, that's been on the program.
And believe it or not, in the almost 18 months that we've been doing this, that's the first time anybody has ever asked me that question.
That's unbelievable. No one's ever said, "What's up, Doc?"
Never.
That's such a good opening. Wow.
That's why I'm laughing right now, because it's the first time I've ever been asked that, believe it or not.
Wow. Okay. So what's up, Doc? Thank you for being on the program. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, a little introduction, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. My name is Alex Balekian. I am born and raised in Glendale, California. I'm the proud son of Armenian immigrants, and I am a practicing physician in the community. And I'm running for office for Congress because I've reached my breaking point. Similar to most of the people listening at home, I have been a lifelong Duke-Majan Republican. And if you've lived in California in the 80s, especially if you are Armenian, it was impossible for you not to be a Duke-Majan Republican. And how I describe myself is keep the streets safe and clean, stay out of my bank account, stay out of my family life. And those are the guiding principles that have formed the bedrock of my campaign, which is all about constitutional liberties. It's all about smaller government, lower taxation, and really refocusing the center of power and decision-making authority back to the home, back to the family.
So you've been a physician, and a lot of people probably wouldn't think a physician wants to put this, your job's already stressful enough. I'm an attorney. Doctors, usually attorneys, on the same level of stress. What made you decide my job in life is not stressful enough? Why don't I run for Congress?
So my job, I'm an intensive care physician, and it's quite stressful to begin with. So this, in comparison, was not difficult or stressful at all. It was going to be time consuming, but it was not stressful. I have always been politically engaged. I've never missed an election. I've always voted via absentee ballot. I know who my senators, my representatives are, my state legislature representation. I keep track of which propositions are up on the ballot. So I am engaged, but as far as advocacy is concerned, I was never somebody who went to Sacramento or called my representative and said, please do this or please vote this way. So, and in my line of work in the intensive care unit, I am in the business of managing unrealistic expectations. I give people bad news every day and I level with them. I don't say that everything's going to be okay. I don't feed them these inspirational dreams. I say, this is where we are. Here's what we can realistically achieve. Let's figure out the best way to get there. And this is what we're going to do, settle for disappointment. So for that reason, and because this seat, which is currently occupied by Adam Schiff, has been for the last 22 years, and he is leaving. So when there's no incumbent, it is anybody's name. And because of that, we were a total of 14 people running. It was supposed to be a Dem on Dem match, as you know, California open primary. There was this no name, never run Republican physician run it, and behold, we were never anybody's bingo card. And then so here we are, and that's because we are a scrappy team and we have a message, a simple message that is really resonating with the average voter who is disenfranchised, disengaged, and frankly disappointed with both extremes that we have right now.
So I'm just going to jump right into that point about your seat. And, we usually on this show, we kind of look at politicians a little side eye who run in districts that are predominantly or solid blue. Because a lot of times we look at people who run in districts that are solid blue and, maybe they promise the world, or I'm not going to name names. There's people who've run in like Maxine Waters district and tried to run against Maxine Waters. And they're like, I'm going to beat Maxine Waters. And you're like, no, you're not. But thanks for raising $10 million and spending on whatever. So I want to go at the heart of this and get your take on why you're a different candidate and why your message you think can resonate and flip this seat that is solidly Democrat.
A few reasons. First, I will say my strengths, and then I'll just go ahead and I'll cover the weaknesses of my opponents. So I have been a lifelong Democrat. I'm so lifelong Republican. Sorry. I'm from here. I'm born and raised here. I'm not a carpetbagger. I have never run for office. I run my own business. I'm running my medical practice while I run this campaign. So as far as having street cred of being from the neighborhood, as far as having street cred of having real world experiences, operating a business through a pandemic, through government mandated shutdowns, I have, that credibility under my name. As far as my platform, I am a moderate Republican. I am fiscally responsible and socially sane. So I'm all for lower taxes, lower government spending, smaller government, but I'm also for staying out of our lives entirely. And that means I don't believe, and I'm going to say this very loudly, I don't believe it's the government's position to insert itself in anything social. For example, gay marriage and abortion. I don't think that is their role. And I think that is one of the largest reasons why Republicans in this state have not done well, because people don't want their private lives run as if we're at a Sunday school. And I'll tell you, because I need to get more Democrats and independents to vote for me rather than Republicans. And I have been going into Democrat territory and speaking with them, and they said, wow, your message resonates with me, but I need to know one thing: how would you vote on abortion? And I say, it is not the government's place. I don't think anybody should insert themselves between a woman and her physician. And that is, I think that physicians, we should police ourselves, and we should make, a code of medical ethics that we control ourselves. But otherwise, I don't think government should be in there. And for that reason, we have been refreshingly moderate, that people have gravitated towards us. Why are my opponents weak? Well, why don't we go through them? The biggest demon that we slayed was Anthony Portantino, State Senator Anthony Portantino, who authored SB 596. And for those who don't know, I am from Glendale. The Glendale Unified parents kicked off a melee in June of 2023 because they were protesting all of the indoctrination, the gender affirming teaching that was going on in their schools. And then Antifa showed up from out of town and started this riot. And of course, the Armenian dads just kind of put them in their place. And in direct response to that, Anthony Portantino, at the behest of the teachers' unions, authored and introduced and passed SB 596, which was the Parent Silencing Act. So that would punish with a $1,000 misdemeanor fine any parent who alarmed, annoyed, or emotionally distressed somebody in the school board. And I'm saying this exactly, that's the word, anything that causes alarm, annoyance, or emotional distress. So it was a very low bar that was going to slap them with a misdemeanor and a $1,000 fine. It passed, but Gavin Newsom vetoed it. So we used that maneuver of his as his fatal flaw. And we went to all the families and said, look, this man stood for this. Do you want this, or do you want somebody who stands for parental rights like me? And that is how we handily beat him. You had another person, school board member from LAUSD, Nick Melvoin, right? LAUSD passed a vaccine mandate for their teachers, for their students. That was not popular. The final boss that I have not yet beat is Laura Friedman. Gosh, Laura Friedman authored a bill that would mandate the HPV vaccine on every California schoolgirl ages 8 to 11. She also called for a COVID vaccine mandate for all Glendale Unified teachers. This at the time when she possessed Pfizer stock. She has voted yes on AB 1955, which is the the Parent Secrecy Act, which keeps private from parents if teachers socially transition their kids, change their pronouns, change their assigned gender, and that teacher is allowed to keep it secret from the parents. She voted yes on that. She also voted yes on Evan Lowe's bill from 2022, which muzzled physicians like me and said, you cannot say anything different from the state's policy on how to treat COVID for fear of retribution of getting your medical license yanked. So when I had patients who had COVID, and I was going to tell them exactly what I thought about Paxlovid, where it's absolute garbage, that the side effects of Paxlovid, the nausea, the raging diarrhea, are worse than the minuscule benefit that you get from taking it. I wasn't allowed to say that as a physician for fear of getting my license yanked. So they got between me and my patients. And so she voted for that. So these are the kinds of things that we're reminding people of, and that is precisely why we're going to win, so long as we can get our word out. And I said, thank you again for getting me on your platform, because this is how we're going to get the word out.
I want to go back to, yeah, I think you touched on something and we discussed before we hopped on. Anybody who's a fan of the show knows we started a pack called the Calipublican Pack, which is basically Republicanism for Californians. And this has always been something that I've said, that my co-host Camila said, that California Republicans have to be different and specific to what Californians need and what is important to Californians. So a Texas Republican or Oklahoma Republican would never win in California. But to your point, there is an opening, I think, for Republicans in California to talk about those issues that are important to California voters. And the notion of, well, let's stay out of everyone's lives. Government shouldn't be in your personal lives. And that includes issues like gay marriage or abortion, where we're not trying to socially engineer your life, where you have to fall in line. And I feel like that is that's kind of like inherent to Californians, right? Like Californians have this kind of, you know, Wild West, go West young man kind of entrepreneurial, like we want to just do our thing, be free spirits. And we have a democratic machine here in California that is just so hell-bent on running your whole life, nanny state everything. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't take this product, you can't buy this product, you can't go to this place, you can't talk about, you can't
drive your car anymore.
Can't drive your car anymore. It's going to be taxed. You can't have gas stoves anymore. It's just become such a nanny state. So that's good to hear that you're trying this new message and it's resonating with voters who may have never looked at Republicans and said, well, that's actually a good message. So I think you have an opportunity there to craft a different message outside of the normal national Republican platform and kind of make it more Californian. Is that sort of what you're seeing, is making your Republican message more for Californians and seeing a positive result?
It's funny they say that, because I'm born and raised in California. This is all I've ever known. This is how I've ever thought. And so it's funny, I'm not trying something for California. I am California. This is who I've always been. This is how I've thought. And I was raised, again, I'm the son of immigrants. My mother was 6 months pregnant with me when she came over here. My parents were refugees. They never looked back, right? So they opened up a small business. They built their American dream. And those are the values that I'm espousing, these immigrant values of hard work, assimilate, learn English, adopt the culture, build your American dream. And so long as the government provides opportunities, but then gets the hell out of my way, we'll all be fine. So that message has been resonating with Latinos, with Koreans, with Armenians in the district. And also it goes against the narrative that has been thrust upon the Republican Party, which is this party of old racist white guys who hate gays and immigrants and want to chain a woman's uterus to the wall. So although I don't lead with identity politics, I have no problem absolutely clobbering the Democrats and the far left progressives at their game of identity politics. Again, when I speak out and say, look, all this, gender pronoun business that you are confusing the kids with, right? I'm not anti-gay. I'm not a homophobe. Neither is my husband. In fact, he and I were closeted gay students, and we excelled in school because our teachers focused not on affirming our identity. They were busy affirming our IQ. And that is why we got this far. And if you simply refocus the decision-making and the authority back to the family and give them opportunities rather than guardrails of how they're supposed to act, that is what's going to bring our golden state back to its luster.
Yeah, it's the age-old adage of rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, if California is doing great and America is doing great, everyone starts to do great. And prosperity is colorblind in that sense, where if everyone's doing well, everyone gets lifted up. And that's an important message to kind of convey to voters. I think I should have gone back and asked this in the beginning. For those who aren't familiar, what area of California does your district encompass, so that people have an idea of like who your voters are?
Sure. So I am running for California's 30th district, currently Adam Schiff is the representative. So if Adam Schiff has been on your ballot as a U.S. House, that's the seat that I'm running for. I'm not running against him. He's now going for the Senate. He's running against Steve Garvey. So California District 30 is very large and very diverse. There are almost 500,000 voters in the area. It covers bedroom communities such as Glendale, Burbank, Sunland, Tujunga. It has more dense apartment living like Hollywood, West Hollywood. It also has areas like Hancock Park, Echo Park, Silver Lake that are considered traditionally more blue. But it's a large mishmash of communities. Oh, and also has a little bit of Pasadena. So it's a very diverse group of people. And as I've told people before, it's not one single message that's going to resonate with everybody. It's not a sledgehammer strategy. It's more of a scalpel strategy that we're applying selectively throughout the district.
So focusing back on your opponent, tell us a little bit about her background, if you want to tell us a little bit about her
Sure.
background, so that way people know what you're up against and where she came from.
Yeah. So I'm running against Laura Friedman, and Laura Friedman is the establishment. She is the candidate for the machine. She is a proud progressive. She started the Progressive Caucus in the California State Assembly back in 2016. She is not from California. She came out here in 2000 to work in film and then just wasn't terribly successful and ended up, randomly in politics. And of course, politics, you mooch off of other people's tax dollars, and then you just work your way up the ladder by selling your soul, which is exactly what she's done. So she is the anointed successor of Adam Schiff. She is somebody who harps on the environment and increasing gas taxes and making it difficult for people to drive their cars so that they are forced to ride their bicycles. And if you have a bicycle lane in your community that has sprung up seemingly overnight and that has swallowed up lanes of traffic, this woman, Laura Friedman, is personally responsible for that, because right now she is ramming through a bill in California that's going to mandate bicycle lanes in every city and is also going to expedite the usual environmental hoops that it needs to go through, including public comments, so that we get these quick build bike projects. And her reasoning is, if more people ride their bikes, then we can save the environment. Wouldn't we all be so fortunate that our places of work and our residences were separated by a leisurely 15-minute bicycle ride, that it wouldn't be 98 degrees out and you're supposed to somehow go on your bicycle to do your grocery shopping or else drop your kids off at school. So she is full of these very unreasonable ideas that mean a lot to her, but that are being rammed down our throats so that she can achieve her dream of this utopia that is all about social justice and somehow, is saving the environment.
You can get me started down here in San Diego. Todd Gloria has been obsessed with bike lanes. I'm pretty sure that's the only thing he's accomplished is bike lanes. I rarely ever see anyone use them. And then when bicyclists are on the road, they're not using them anyway. It's still blocking traffic. Right. So don't get me started.
And then you have the homeless tents that are spilling out into those bicycle lanes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They're a mess. And we end up not being able to drive down the street. And to your point, up in LA or like in that area, most people live hours away from their work anyway. So there's no idea of like, you're not going to ride your bicycle for a 2-hour drive to your work in LA or wherever you're going. It's just not practical at all.
And from a public safety standpoint, I am a physician. I work in the intensive care unit. I take care of stroke patients. With strokes, minutes matter. And we have seen EMS vehicles, ambulances, trucks not able to navigate because people cannot move out because of the concrete barriers separating the roads from the bicycle lanes. So yes, I'm so sorry, Phil, but your mother is going to be paralyzed because of her stroke, but at least you can bicycle to work.
Right. That's what's important. And that's what the government really, that's something I tweeted about a couple of weeks ago, is how the government is inherently bad at creating demand for something, where they will go, well, we think that there's a huge demand for bike lanes. Well, where do you get that from? Well, if we create bike lanes, more people will use bike lanes. Well, there's no evidence to show people use bike lanes a lot, but we're going to try and artificially create the demand for bike lanes. A saying, I was looking at your site before we hopped on. One of your sayings is progressivism isn't working.
Yes.
Expound on that for us a little bit in that saying.
Yeah. So right now, this election, this is no longer Democrat versus Republican. It is progressive versus non-progressive. It is the 80% of us in the moderate middle, moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, independents, who do not want our government to apologize on behalf of criminals. We want them apprehended and prosecuted and punished. We don't want you to apologize on behalf of homeless people and say it's not their fault. We want to disband these tent cities. We want these homeless people to have their mental illness and their drug addiction get diagnosed and get treated. We don't want to have to say, oh, we're bad people if we don't let in immigrants. I'm the son of immigrants. I get it. We should recruit and retain skilled, industrious immigrants who are going to contribute productively to the society, but there has to be a coherent way that we do it. We have people, again, I'm a physician. California just approved free medical insurance for 750,000 illegal immigrants, plus whoever crosses into the state since they did that. But they didn't increase the number of doctors treating patients. So necessarily that's going to increase the wait times for our own citizens who are struggling to pay for that medical insurance, but it's being given for free to illegal immigrants in addition to their debit cards with $600 loaded on it every month. Wouldn't we love to have, wouldn't a family of four love to have those debit cards? So those kinds of progressive ideas that, really there's this emotional blackmail saying, oh, you're a bad person if you disagree with helping people. No, there's a way to do it. There's an efficient way to do it. And we should establish that goal and try to work towards it, but not have to step over people that are here, people that are working hard, and having to pay for it all. So that's where our campaign slogan, progressive isn't working, came from. Other slogans that we have, ideas over identity politics. Again, I say this is not Republican versus Democrat. We should not vote blindly for an R or a D. We should vote for the person who has the best ideas. We Armenians in Glendale, we have fallen for this trap. Right? If you see an IAN or a YAN at the back of somebody's name, 99% of the time they're going to be Armenian, and that is how Armenians vote. Unfortunately, we have been saddled with representatives, city council members, etc., who have been so completely far left woke in their thinking that they have voted for bills that have gone completely counter to what traditional Armenian immigrant values are. So that is where, and it's been resonating. We have billboards up on the freeway and people say, past your billboard, I love what you're saying. Progressive isn't working. I agree. We've had these unexpected contributions on our website, political contributions, $50, $100 from staunch Democrats. And when I call them and I say, how did this happen? They say, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the homeless people. I'm sick of the crime. The pendulum has swung too far left. We need to bring it in the middle. And that is why I say I'm a center-right individual, and I'm going to be working with center-left voters to bring this pendulum back to center.
Going on the, progressivism in California is definitely a nightmare, or at least a foreboding tale for the rest of the country. One perfect example that is definitely taking over the news headlines of how far California has gotten is got to be AB 1955. I think that has probably become such a hot button issue of how absolutely far and radical California has gone, where California effectively or implicitly is now saying, we are going to co-parent with your children in public school by saying we also get to make a decision what you know about your kids. And we get to, because we're public school educators and we're the government and we're Sacramento, we think that way. You have no say in what goes on with your child at school. What are your thoughts on AB 1955 and how far radical this has gotten in California?
AB 1955 is a terrible law. I'm just going to go out and say it. I am absolutely against it. I would like to work to repeal it. And I think that we need to elect more reasonable center representatives who are going to overturn AB 1955. The first big problem that I have with AB 1955 is actually one of your assembly members, right, Ward, down from there from San Diego area, has conflated gay and trans. So me being a gay man, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, that is sexual orientation, that is sexual preference. That is not how you view yourself as gender. So trans is a completely different topic. And what they've done is, unfortunately, they said, oh, we don't want to out gay kids to their parents. Yeah, I don't want to out gay kids to their parents either. That is not what we're talking about, right? And you teachers shouldn't really be talking to a 14-year-old about who they want to have sex with, separate from their parents, if it's not in a class that talks about sex education and safe sex. So now going on to the trans side, me as a physician, if a child says, I am questioning my gender, I don't know, I feel like I'm in the wrong body. If that child says that, that child can be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. By definition, gender dysphoria is associated with a higher risk of self-harm or suicide. By definition, that is a life-threatening condition. Who are you to withhold information about a life-threatening condition from a parent? If I, as a physician, did that, that would be malpractice. I would be liable for malpractice. And again, children don't have medical capacity when they're 12 years old. They don't have decision-making capabilities. We need to go to their legal guardians, who are their parents. And also, I am anti-misdiagnosing these kids. I am also anti-shunting them down this pathway of irreversible hormone and surgical therapy when that has never been shown to be superior to basic talk therapy when you look at outcomes of suicide, self-harm, and quality of life. I can say that definitively as a physician. I can say that definitively as a health services researcher who writes clinical practice guidelines, who scours the medical literature to look for studies, high quality studies that examine different clinical questions. So I have the credibility to say that this law is not based in anything except fear-mongering from the far left progressives.
We had an episode on this a couple weeks ago, all about AB 1955, and we had shown a video clip of a self-avowed progressive Democrat teacher who went to Sacramento and testified against AB 1955.
I saw her. Yeah.
And her testimony was very powerful, where she said, look, I am a self-avowed progressive Democrat. And she went into the whole thing about what happened with her son and how he had gender dysphoria, and they worked through it on a personal family level, and he no longer has gender dysphoria. But her whole thing was, we don't want to be co-conspirators in hiding this information from parents. We don't want to be involuntary co-conspirators. That's not our job. Like, teachers already have enough to deal with, and now they have to keep secrets about children's gender identity. And then she also made the point, to your point, which is the same, of they are conflating sexual orientation to gender identity, and they're not the same thing. So Chris Ward is actually my assembly member, so yay for me. But yeah, that's again, it all comes back to sort of your messaging of, even progressive Democrats are going, whoa, hold on here. We've kind of lost what's going on here. We've lost the message. We're kind of going way off the deep end. And a lot of progressive Democrats in California are going, can we just come back a little bit to like the things that matter? And we're just kind of getting a little too far off base. Now you're running for Congress, which obviously that changes your scope of work on a national scale. You know, I could talk about California all night, and there's a lot of things wrong with California, and you also are here in California. I want to get your take on some of your priorities, or you know, outlook on national issues going into Congress, and how that can work. or what you're going to do when you get there?
Yeah, so from national issues, again, so this thing about AB 1955, so how can I impact that from Congress? I would say, me as a physician who practices evidence-based medicine, and federal dollars are going to pay for things like Medi-Cal, that's going to pay for care for children. And we should not be giving federal dollars to hospitals or clinics that are not practicing evidence-based medicine. And I, again, have that credibility being a different breed of candidate, Republican candidate, who can speak to that and say, okay, we will not be funding these treatments that have no data behind them, that are not considered standard of care. And in fact, you know, echoing what that teacher who testified in Sacramento said, we have zero high quality data comparing head to head medicines and surgery versus talk therapy, but we actually have some data, long-term, large-scale data from Germany and the Netherlands to say that overwhelming majority, 95% of children with gender dysphoria will outgrow it by the time they're 25 years old. They all become gay men and women. And the ones with persistent gender dysphoria end up being lesbian women with coexisting mental illness, depression, anxiety, what have you. And so we definitely have data to support that teacher's assertion that with simple talk therapy, this will go away on its own. And for every one student who truly has gender dysphoria, we will be misdiagnosing and irreversibly mistreating 19 gay kids by mislabeling them as trans. And so from Congress, I can say we will not devote federal dollars to state Medicaid programs that are not practicing evidence-based medicine. Other things that I can do. So again, I'm the candidate of public safety. My opponent, Laura Friedman, is the threat to public safety. We talked about the safety to children. Let's talk about drug overdoses. In 2022, an average of 3 high school students, teens, age 14 to 18, an average of 3 died per day from an unintentional fentanyl overdose when they did pills, when they did marijuana that was laced with fentanyl. That is, we know, produced in China and smuggled through Mexico. So from Congress, I will vote to secure the border, prevent the influx of all of this fentanyl that is coming in illegally from the southern border and also from our marine ports. When you stem the flow of fentanyl, that will also help the homelessness crisis. Again, I am the candidate of public safety. My opponent, Laura Friedman, she is a threat to public safety. Rather than focusing on securing the border, stemming the flow of illegal fentanyl that then fuels these drug dens, that then enables these homeless people's addictions and prevents them from getting clean. What did she do? She authored a bill that would create state-sponsored safe injection sites. So I say eradicate the fentanyl. She says enable the fentanyl use. It had passed both chambers of Congress. In Senate, it was co-sponsored by none other than Scott Wiener. But then the idea was so bad that even Gavin Newsom said, I can't get behind this, and he vetoed it. So those two things, making sure that our federal dollars go to giving care that is evidence-based, making sure that we secure our borders, prevent the influx of illegal fentanyl, and even things such as crime. So here we have, in California, we have, stealing $950 worth of merchandise, and we have progressive district attorneys like George Gascon and Chesa Boudin in the Bay Area who refuse to enforce the laws and prosecute them. From Congress, I can make it a federal offense to steal from a small business owner with fewer than 100 employees. So if you are a business owner and you get robbed and George Gascon or the DA doesn't want to prosecute that criminal, you can then go to the FBI and the Department of Justice because it would be a federal crime and say, please prosecute this. And then you would still have your day in court to punish those criminals.
That's interesting. I never really thought of that idea of making a federal crime because then it creates the, it takes it out of the hands of California DAs who go, well, I don't want to prosecute this. And it goes, okay, well, then we'll just go to the federal court and take this.
Precisely.
So That's an interesting idea, and definitely for a lot of smaller shops. I just got an idea, and I want to play a hypothetical with you.
Okay.
Okay,
I love
we're
games.
gonna play. We're gonna play a little game. Okay, so rewind. You are the sitting congressman from the 30th district
Mhm.
in 2020.
Okay.
COVID happens. You are a practicing physician. You are an expert. You have medical expertise on this. What are some things that if you were in Congress at that time you would have done?
So first, I think that the more local control you give back to governments, the better, because one size will not fit all. We are a ginormous country. We're like the European Union. We are a confederation of states. You know, France is different from Spain, is different from Italy, is different from Germany. So same thing, California, our California identity is different from Texas, different from Florida. We have different needs. We have different natural resources. So one of the first things that I would do is say, okay, let's try to localize the response as best as possible. Let's give federal resources to help them execute it, but have, you know, locally change things how they do. That said, government shutdowns in March that happened, March of 2020. I don't fault anybody for their initial shutdown, right? We didn't know what was happening. So I don't fault California, Texas, whatever, Florida from shutting down. That said, after 3 months, you say, okay, we have built up enough data. Let's go back and look. Let's see, what are our rates? Can we safely open up? Do we need to sequester everybody, or can we allow younger, able-bodied individuals to go to work safely? We can allow children to go back into the classroom safely because they're not the ones dying, but older people, yes, they should be sequestered at home. We should focus our efforts on them. So that is how I would have done it. And I will actually tell you, so I'm an intensive care physician, and my husband and I were watching this unfold in March of 2020. And I told him, I said, okay, I was looking at the data from Italy. And in Italy at that time, yes, people were dying. Nobody under 80 was dying. There was the one physician, an ophthalmologist in Wuhan, who initially described COVID. He died, I think he was maybe in his early 50s. And I told my husband, well, it looks like the old and frail are dying. It looks like if you are genetically predispositioned to do poorly with this, how are you going to change your genes? So I said, okay, chances are nothing's going to happen to me. But if I hit the genetic lottery in the wrong way, regardless of all these, vaccines, et cetera, I said, I'm not going to do well. So what I do, I got a life insurance policy. And then I said, okay, let's work this. So that is how I would have handled it. Again, hindsight is 2020, but that's why I said the initial response in March of 2020, where everybody shut down, I don't fault anybody for doing that. We didn't know what we were dealing with. But I think after 3 months or 4 months of experience, of data, and saying, okay, what happened? Who got sick? Who got hospitalized? Then I would have said, okay, can we just open up safely rather than shutting everything down? And what I would have done is I would have bolstered the healthcare system. I would have, tried to figure out a more efficient way to take care of the maximum number of patients, rather than doing these mass shutdowns that were, in hindsight, as we found out, more destructive than productive.
Yeah, just going back, obviously we didn't know what was going on. We were seeing the images from Italy, and the news was pumping up the images of what's going on in Italy and hospitals being overrun. So yeah, we can look back and say we should have done that, but it was kind of terrifying when it happened. I think the issue that sticks with a lot of people is how long it kind of like dragged on, and that was from like those in the federal government here in California. It just seemed like the government took this opportunity too far. It's almost like you gave them an inch, the whole government took a mile. They were like, okay, well, we have this emergency power. We can tell you to don't go to Thanksgiving with your family because that's a super spreader event. Don't go to Christmas with your family. That's a super spreader event. It just got to the point where we weren't looking at the data or facts, which a lot of people were looking at. And it dragged on, and it was kind of this dissonance of like the government was telling you one thing that you can't do anything, but then you're looking at the numbers and that, the mortality rate was incredibly low, and people are going, well, what are we doing here? Like, why is there such a dissonance between the two of them, right?
Well, we knew exactly why it dragged on, right? And let's say it out in the open. At the same time that this pandemic was folding, it was also an election year. And there was a highly unpopular individual in the White House who a lot of people no longer wanted in the White House. And they saw that this would be an excellent opportunity to drag down the one thing that makes a sitting president popular, which is the economy. So let's be honest with this, right? So which states remained closed? The blue states, California, Illinois, New York, those states remained closed. You had the red states like Texas and Florida, which remained open. So this was unfortunately purely political. So I am upset because my craft, my profession of medicine was suddenly thrust in the spotlight and made political. And everything that we did was no longer about what is best for patients, what is best for public health, where you try to save the most lives by using the fewest resources. Yeah. And that unfortunately was made political because a lot of people didn't want this unpopular sitting president to be reelected.
Yeah, and it got to the point where it got so political that sometimes when it gets so political and heated, to your point about moderate people in the moderate positions, is that you create these echo chambers of the extremes, the extreme right and the extreme left, where they're both expounding these salacious ideas that are not entirely based in reality, but pushes their political agenda. And then it drowns out experts like yourself. Or, I mean, here in California, we got that famous case of the two doctors who came forward and, they got absolutely railroaded for it because they came out and said, well, here's the data. We're two doctors and this is what we found. And then they were passing laws that you can't talk about COVID in different ways to treat it. So it kind of, the noise just drowned out sensible people, sensible physicians like yourself from even being able to have a voice in this arena. Right.
Yeah. And also if you're being skeptical about it, I remember very well reading on my smartphone from the Washington Post, and they would have articles about COVID. And I remember it said, this article is being provided to you for free. Meaning this alarmism is being provided to you for free because, who owned the Washington Post? Jeff Bezos. Who owned Amazon? Jeff Bezos. And if papers like the Washington Post stoked alarmism and caused people to stay at home, they would more likely shop from Amazon than they would from their brick and mortar stores. So again, even if they say, oh, Alex, you're wearing a tinfoil hat, the appearance of impropriety of a newspaper owned by the same guy who owns the largest shopping network, where if you didn't leave your home, you would still have everything that you needed, that appearance of impropriety, then, the exploitative nature of those who are able to profit, that unfortunately also propagated the political hysteria that was there because people wanted to hamstring Donald Trump.
Yeah, it was facts are facts. It was the largest transfer of wealth in American history. So,
yeah,
we saw the amount of money that went to huge corporations like Amazon. We got about 15 minutes left. In the last couple minutes, focusing again on national. You're not the only Californian looking to go to Washington in this November. We now have a race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Joe Biden unceremoniously pushed out. First time in my life I've ever seen a president pushed out and not able to run. What are your thoughts on the potential presidents that you could be working with in Congress?
So what I tell people is, well, first of all, nobody had any of this on their bingo card, right? Biden being pushed out, Trump, the assassination attempt on Trump. And what I tell people is there's still 84 days until November. A lot can still happen. There can be another assassination attempt. Kamala Harris could actually do an interview where she bombs. And then the Democratic Party says, well, who are we going to replace her with? And then they, maybe bring up Tim Walz. I'm not sure. But what I remind people is I am running for Congress. That is the legislative branch. The legislative branch writes the laws. And the House even right? Taxation, tax bills come from the House. So what I tell people is it doesn't matter who the president is. I am going to be writing laws that are going to cater to my people. What is my, as a single issue voter, what is my issue? It is a balanced budget. So I will never vote for deficit spending if it's a Republican or a Democratic budget that comes up. That is my personal red line. And so I'm going to, if the president says I need, spending to do X, Y, Z, I want to increase the debt ceiling, I will vote no. So not that it's immaterial for me who the president is, but I will be voting. I will go there on a mandate of what is important to my people in District 30. And what is important for them is fiscal responsibility, right? We would all be better off if we ran this country like we run our own households, on a budget and with minimal interference from outside sources. So, we want responsible spending from the government. We want spending cuts. We don't want our tax dollars to go to fighting other people's wars. We want them to fight our homelessness, house our homeless veterans. We want the criminals to be punished. So those are the kinds of those are the kinds of laws that I will write. And that is how I will vote. And not that it's immaterial who the president is, but whichever president is more for personal responsibility, focusing on our citizens, getting a stronger border, stemming the inflow of fentanyl, helping the homeless by diagnosing their mental illness and getting them reunited with their families who are going to keep them sober. That is the kind of legislation I'm going to go for. And so that's the kind of president that I'm hoping will sign off on our bill and not veto it.
I mean, I love that idea. I think the federal government needs to be reined in astronomically. I think it's a bloated parasite at this point. And I love that you're saying if it raises deficit spending, it's an automatic no. It doesn't matter who it is and who proposed the bill. Is there any chance of? I mean, we are so far in debt in this country. And the deficit's out of control. But the debt, it's astronomical. I don't think Americans realize how bad the debt is and how much we are responsible for personally. Everybody's personally responsible for. Everyone thinks it's this magic number that we're not personally responsible for, but somebody has to pay it eventually. Tell us from your input, is there any hope on the federal government ever tackling this debt or paying it down?
Absolutely. So we need to prioritize what we're going to spend on, right? Just because you have a lot of debt doesn't mean you're going to stop buying groceries. It doesn't mean that you're going to stop paying your electricity bills and somehow live on the street, right? You tighten your belts, but you say, okay, I don't need to get the Manuka honey from Whole Foods. I'm going to go and get just the regular.
I don't
honey.
even know what Manuka honey is, so that's new to me.
I don't know either, but it was on an episode of Broad City, so it was it's just this really type of this frou expensive honey. But a government should focus on the health, wealth, and security of its own citizens, and it should do so as efficiently as possible. So health, I think we should not cut. I think we should keep, and we should bolster something like Medicare, Medicaid, which is helpful for our own citizens. Wealth, we shouldn't touch Social Security, right? They're older people on fixed incomes. They're frail. They can't expect to work until they're in their 80s. So things like Social Security, Medicare, don't touch those. Health, wealth, security. So we have a very large defense budget. 60% of it is defense for our own shores. We shouldn't be sending hundreds of billions of dollars to NATO countries to fund their defense, especially countries like Turkey, which are blackmailing us for F-16 fighter jets, which are telling us, if you side with Israel against Palestine, we will attack you. What kind of ally of ours is threatening to attack us, especially when we're giving them hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So the first step is cut our spending, prioritize the spending on things that are of benefit to us. And then once we balance the budget that way, then you can start cutting taxes, starting with working class Americans, and then working your way up to higher class Americans as we pay down our debt more and more. So that is how I would do it. Same as how you would do it in your own home. If you say, okay, we spent this much because we remodeled the house, and then, oh crap, I just got laid off, and now I have to go work at McDonald's, because that's the only job that I could get on such short notice. you say, okay, I have to tighten my belt because I have to pay for this. We do it ourselves in our own homes. We know how to do it. And I think we should just simply take that to the federal level.
I think, when you get to Congress, if I were you, I'd make a beeline over to Thomas Massey's office, because it sounds like you guys would probably get along on a lot of these issues when it comes to spending.
Right.
And for the federal government, instead of buying your groceries at Erewhon, maybe you buy your groceries at Ralph's from here on out. Maybe you don't buy and you maybe look in the sale section or the clearance section.
Or you go to the mom and pop shop, the ethnic market, where they have the fresh fruits and vegetables, and rather than going to the large corporate supermarkets, you then go to the small businesses, and that is how you keep the money within our working middle class.
Right. Big fan of the mom and pops, farmers markets, stuff like that. Go check them out. We got a couple minutes left. I want to thank you again for coming on. This has been a great conversation.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I feel like you and I could probably talk about this for hours.
Over drinks, though.
Next time, over drinks. So in the last couple minutes, I want to get your opinion, just a little bit more, a closing argument about yourself, why people should check you out. And
So again, so thank you, Phil, for having me on. I am Dr. Alex Balekian, born and raised in Glendale, lifelong Californian, and I am running for Congress because I have reached my breaking point. This is a deeply blue district, but this is not a suicide mission, because there is a palpable discontent with everyone out there who is disenfranchised, disgruntled with both extremes of the political spectrum. This is no longer a Democrat versus Republican contest. This is progressive versus non-progressive. These are California values of rugged individualism and personal responsibility that we all abide by. This is all about opportunity and not necessarily equity of outcome. The harder you work, the more you will realize your American dream. And this is a unique, and I'm saying a unique opportunity, because this seat has no incumbent for the first time in 22 years. And I, as the non-traditional candidate, the man of the people, the civilian, not the career politician, am running, and we have gotten this far. We've beaten everybody, and we're at the last boss. And this is why I want to underscore the importance of this. What we need are votes, contributions, introductions. If you live in California 30, please be engaged. If you know somebody who lives in California 30, those are Glendale, Burbank, Hollywood, West Hollywood, Sunland, Tahunga, Hancock Park, Echo Park, Silver Lake. Tell those people to vote. As far as contributions, you can contribute your money, or you can even contribute your time. We need people to do phone banking. We have the lists of all the voters. We would love for you to sign up on our website, alexforca30.com, or else alexbalekian.com. You can sign up on our website and do telephone calls and phone banking from your own home to help us out. But I want to underscore the importance of us winning this, because this will start a tidal wave. It will start a ripple effect along the entirety of the state, because this will be Californians, moderate, reasonable, middle of the road Californians doing the unthinkable, which is winning this seat and snatching it from the political establishment and bringing it back to the center where all of us are, and making sure that the government works for us and not for the well-connected few that are currently running it.
Well, I just want to say, we had discussed at the beginning of the episode how usually on our podcast, for our listeners and people who tune in all the time, we don't usually do this where we have people on who are running in districts that are solidly Democrat because of X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say Alex might be the exception, where he's made it through the primary. He's well-spoken. He knows what he's talking about. He's out there actually pushing the flesh and pressing the flesh and actually getting stuff done. So this is one of those exceptions where if you can flip this district, Alex is right. It's a shot across the bow for California, where all of a sudden they go, whoa, how did we lose this district? And if this is the blueprint, and then the blueprint can be replicated in other districts on state level, local level, federal level, this is how it starts. This is, if you want to turn California back, this is how it starts. You got to win this race, take that blueprint, go to another race, and keep winning and just building up those seats. So, Alex, good job on taking on this Herculean effort of running. Best of luck to you. And again, where can people go? And you were talking about, you were disappointed you can't show off your shirt. You want to show off your shirt?
Yes.
Real quick?
So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, vote Alex Balekian for Congress November 5th. So you can go to alexbalekian.com, or our website is alexforca30.com, alexforca30.com, and you can find us there, or on Instagram and on X.
Great. Well, Alex, thanks for coming on again. Best of luck in the race. And
Thank you.
We'll finish off every episode as we always do. If you like this episode, make sure you like, share, subscribe, or review, all that stuff. Hit the notification bell. And the best thing you can do is to support this show that is 100% free, is share it with someone you know, and especially someone in the 30th district who might want to learn about Alex. So with that, we'll see you all in the next one. Have a good night. Later.